Welcome to Bedtime Whispers, where darkness comes to life and nightmares become reality. Something I had almost forgotten when I was 9 years old. That is, 40 years ago, in a pioneer camp near Krasnoyarsk, an accident happened to me. I, a tadpole in love with a new counselor, ran away right after the horn. There was no way I could appear before my love in the glow of my skinny pale legs and shaved head after lice. My sister brought it from kindergarten. I was supposed to wear black shorts, which my grandmother had sewn for growing up, with a universal elastic waistband, in anticipation that I would grow older and wean myself at camp. But neither Fat nor Tan adhered to me, and I hung out in these shorts like a white worm in a skirt. They did feed me fine, though. We generally had the best camp. Oh, that's not subjective. We competed from the chemical and metallurgical plant Swallow, and the black swallow on the gate, and pioneer campfires, and war games, and camping. I got all that for 3 weeks, and then I ran away. Not really, not home, not in the direction of the city, but just to wander in the woods, to relive my first feeling. Of course, I got lost. Of course, I climbed a tree for the benefit of the reserve nearby, the cyanide cliffs. It's not hard to orient myself. And the next thing is simple. My hand got stuck in a deep crack of an old pine tree. Trying to pull my hand out, I practically hung on it and, of course, broke it. I managed to sit on the branch, but I couldn't get my arm out, and by the time they found me, amputation was inevitable. Now I type, as you might guess, with one hand, and now, after smoking for cigarettes after the last paragraph, I will tell what I don't believe, what seems to me to be complete nonsense, and what I have known deep down inside myself all these 40 years, while managing to lie to myself even in my memories. Every time I looked at the stump, at that white-pink, smooth, bumpy end of my hand that still disgusts me, I thought, cracked pine, crush syndrome, amputation. Not once in my whole life had I tried to remember those hours in detail, and never once was I surprised by it. But 2 weeks ago, while making rounds of area veterans at work, I met an old man, the former head of a pioneer camp, and it turned out that I remembered everything. I remember climbing the first 3 meters of a pine tree, a rough trunk with no branches, covering my palms and shins with tar and small abrasions. As I glanced down at about 5 meters, my whole body cramped up like a muscle with fear. My legs buckled, straddling the branch on which I was sitting, and twisted beneath it in a lock. My hands clutched at the trunk, my cheek pressed into the tree, and I was instantly soaked in resin. My skin ached, and the branches above my head were so thick that I couldn't see the sky. Far below, the ground was grassless, with lumpy tree roots ripping through the red clay soil. Between the roots, you could see pieces of cyanide protruding from the ground. If you fell, you could not avoid fractures. Gradually, fear began to replace self-pity. Not only was I lost and couldn't get off, but I was ugly and funny and my palms were on fire. And if anyone found out I was in love, I would be teased to death. And no one would come to rescue me. And my mother would have a new son. And my father wouldn't have to go away on shifts for months because he would love him and change jobs. And I would freeze at night and fall down, and no one would find me. Such thoughts went round and round, and I gave them free rein. But as I cried, I suddenly discovered that I was no longer afraid. When I realized that there was no one to complain with my tears, I remember that very well. I was thrilled to find the intention of saving myself and returning to the camp as a hero. And then it turned out that I could not tear my right palm from the pine tree. The burning in my torn fingers and palm intensified manifold. And when I tried to pull myself out, the pain shot through them so much that I choked to death. I yanked and twisted my arm, trying to reach the opposite side of the trunk and see what was holding it. But every disturbance caused new pain. It was as if a needle had been jammed into every cell of the skin in my palm, and those needles continued to move slowly, very slowly, farther and farther away. Soon there was a purple bruise crawling up my forearm. I watched as the swelling spread from my invisible hand to my elbow, and I lost the ability to move my arm. The pain increased so quickly that I had no time to adjust to it. If I may, I won't describe the next few hours in detail. Very soon I realized that the tree would not let go of my skin. If I touched a branch or a trunk with my bare knees, shins, or cheek, after a minute, when I tried to pull away, small pieces of horny skin, like you could cut with a razor, would remain on the bark. Longer contact left my blood on the tree, droplets of which, before they had time to run down the bark, were absorbed into it. Knee-length underwear and slippers were my salvation. All these discoveries I was making amidst the growing pain. My unmoving palm felt as if it were being burned with a burning iron, chewed with teeth and broken bones. I screamed, and I cried again, and I beat the wood, and I broke my voice, but I still screamed, squealed, sobbed, and then I didn't care anymore. I was tired. The sun had passed its zenith, and the shadows from the branches were thicker and colder. I leaned my forehead against the trunk and counted to 50. Then I leaned my cheek and counted to 50. Then I put my left hand under my head and counted. When I got tired of counting, I would fall asleep and nothing would happen. My right forearm doubled in size, and the bruise crawled up to my shoulder. I pissed myself and didn't notice it right away. I froze up, and now I felt my arm as if it were something foreign. It hurt unimaginably, but as if it wasn't me. Everything else hurt. My legs, my neck, my stomach. I found myself with my forehead pressed against the trunk. How long I had sat like that, I did not notice. I began to count, but could not remember the order of the numbers. So I called out numbers at random. 2, 10, 7. The number 50 seemed to glow in front of me, but I couldn't catch up. The skin on my forehead felt like it was burned with a talon, and I didn't move. And I didn't respond when several voices started shouting my name at once. And then the chainsaw screeched, falling with the tree. I lost consciousness. I broke 2 ribs, my collarbone, and 3 toes. I remember only one more moment. I opened my eyes, and a cloth with a pungent smell was pressed to my nose, and a woman's voice persuaded me to breathe in. Little one, breathe in. I am held in my weight, and a thick, dark pipe goes from my shoulder to the lying trunk of a pine tree. I don't immediately realize it's my hand. The palm is gone. My hand goes into the woody growth where my palm should be. I inhale sharply. A sharp stench hits my throat, and it's like I'm drowning in warm water. The last thing I saw was a strange metal instrument being held to my hand. I woke up only 8 days later in the hospital in Devlagarsk, a small town near Krasnoyarsk, which was only a small town at the time. The doctor forbade my mother to take me to Krasnoyarsk. On the first day after I woke up, along with the camp commander and the camp doctor, there was another person who came to see me. He told me over and over again about a crack in an old pine tree, about the danger of prolonged squeezing, about how bravely I tried to jump out of the pine tree, breaking my arm in the process. No matter how hard I try, I can't remember his clothes or his face. A few days later, my father, who had heard the news of my misfortune, arrived, and I told him about the crack and the fracture in my voice, barely breaking after the breakdown. And it turned out that there was nothing to stop me from going back to the sea. There wasn't much left. I'll take a break and tell you what it's like to live after an arm amputation. It's okay, I guess. I recently read a book by that invalid without arms or legs, Vadsik, and I've read others too. But maybe it's too late now, because it seems that everything is getting better physically, but I still feel the ceiling. All my life I have felt the ceiling. Some kind of bar that I just don't dare to jump to. Well, yeah, my fault. Maybe I could have overcome it. But the bottom line is this. I'm 50. I'm single. I work at a social service center. I hand out benefits to veterans. And I'm disgusted to look at myself naked. This is me stalling for time. So, on New Year's Eve, I spent a few hours visiting the former head of a pioneer camp. By virtue of his position, this man had signed more than one non-disclosure paper in his life. It would seem the head of a children's camp. And now, in extreme old age, he does not even know if these bans imposed on him by another country are now in effect. For 20 years no one has reminded him of these papers. One of them gave him and the camp's staff physician strict instructions about the prohibition against taking children out of the camp into the woods and searching for such runaways. In particular, the involvement of persons outside the list specified in the paper in the search for the missing was allowed only on the second day. And on the first day, members of the search party had to have a chainsaw or, in its absence, a two-handed saw and axes at their disposal. I do not want, but I must tell about 2 photos from his archive. There was a tree and some kind of beast, a section of the back of some animal, most likely a small bear cub, and other than this section of the back sticking out of the trunk, there was nothing left of the animal. The next photo showed a sawed-off section of this tree, just level with the remnants of the bear. The black and white photo allowed us to see the abnormal change in the structure of the rings on the fresh cut of the stump. Just chaos, and dark spots sprawled all over the cut. To retell the camp commander's story is no longer possible. According to him, he saw such trees 5 times. Twice he was shown them on purpose, and 3 times he saw them himself, including the episode with me. That's all now. While I was writing, I smoked 22 cigarettes, and the main thing for what I wrote it all, questions. How often does a person walking in the woods lean against a tree with their bare skin and stand still for more than a minute? How many people who get lost in the woods and are not found later, tired, have fallen asleep leaning against a tree trunk? How many among ordinary trees can there be such trees? And how many times have I, or any of us, passed by such without knowing that this particular tree should not be leaned against for more than a minute? Thank you so much for your attention. Subscribe to the channel. See you soon.